Hi there, everyone. Welcome. My name's Oliver Barker. I'm the director here at the Cape Ann Museum. We're delighted to see so many of you here today. It's obviously a special occasion and a great partnership that the museum has with the Rocky Neck Art Colony. So thank you for coming out and thank you for supporting the Cape Ann Museum and obviously all the great work that the Rocky Neck Colony does in support of contemporary practitioners here on Cape Ann. I wanted just to share with you, I also actually wanted to just thank my colleague Courtney Richardson, who's our Director of Education here, for organising this event today, along with Kendall Reynolds, who's done a fantastic job in obviously pulling this all together. So if you could just join me in a brief thank you for them, that would be great. As some of you may know, I'm a reasonably new arrival here at the Cape Ann Museum, and I wanted to share with you that the museum, as I see it, is at a very exciting and pivotal moment in its history. Some of you may have seen, and if you haven't, I would invite you to visit afterwards the exhibition of Winslow Homer that we have upstairs on level 3. It's a wonderful exhibition featuring 51 works by Winslow Homer. When the museum first conceived of the exhibition 11 years ago, we were going to bring just 4 paintings by Homer together, and we got a little carried away. But for all good reason, because the show looks at 11 seminal years that Homer spent here, predominantly on Cape Ann, visiting Manchester, and then coming on 3 successive occasions to Gloucester. And you'll see when he arrives here, he was a confident and quite well-known illustrator, and by the time he leaves with the confidence of a fully fledged watercolorist and painter. So it's a very exciting transition to witness, and I encourage you all to enjoy the show. The 51 works come from a whole range of both private and institutional lenders, and it kind of is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see them here in context of the very place in which they were created. So please enjoy that. I would say also that the museum is delighted to be the voice of artists, of course, both past and present, and we are committed certainly to bringing new life and vitality to our institution and to our community. As such, we are all here today to celebrate contemporary art, and as a firm believer that the arts matter and that arts changes lives, the Cape Ann Museum is delighted to partner with the Rocky Neck Art Colony in this 15th year of its artist residency program. In fact, since 2008, the Cape Ann Museum has hosted the opening lecture of the Distinguished Artist Teacher of the Goetemann Artist Residency at the Rocky Neck Colony. It is my pleasure to welcome Ruth Mordechai, who, as many of you know, is a talented artist in our community whose work resides here at the Cape Ann Museum and in many other prominent collections. Ruth is one of the co-directors of the Artist Residency Program, so please join me in welcoming Ruth, who will now introduce our 2 distinguished speakers this afternoon.
I did not expect an introduction about my own work, so thank you very much. So I can't see you because the lights are out, but I welcome you all, and I'm sure we are filled with Gloucester artists here who are excited about Joan being here. So thank you to the Cape Ann Museum, and as always to Courtney Richardson, Director of Programming. It's a beautiful day and a very special day for the arts in Gloucester, because Joan Snyder is here and her daughter Molly Snyder-Fink joins her for their conversation about the art of Joan Snyder. This also represents a profoundly important conversation from one generation to the next, and a testament to the full and rich life of Joan as artist and woman. She feels her daughter knows her work perhaps the best of anyone. Joan Snyder is a national treasure. She's a great painter and without question stood her creative ground with the great painters of the last 50 years. Her work is very much about her lived experience and is accessible to the viewer. I will say a few words about our program, and then I will return to introducing Joan Snyder and Molly Snyder-Fink. I am representing the Goetemann Artist Residency of the Rocky Neck Art Colony. We are a committee of 11 dedicated artists and arts professionals who jury and manage this program. Founded by Gordon Goetemann in 2005, this is our 15th anniversary. I need to tell you the members of our committee. Barbara Moody, Janice Brand, Jeffrey Newell, Yana Coffin, Anne Marie Crotty, Cynthia Roth, Terry Del Percio, Randolph Keltz, Renee Gonzalez, and Connie Vallis. Kathleen Gurdon-Archer is a former director from 2015 to 2017. Gordon's vision was to have this residency program bring fresh creative ideas from around the world to this community and in return to share our creative vision as well. In 2008, with the support of Rhonda Falloon, former director, we established the Distinguished Artist Teacher Program as a collaboration between the Goetemann Artist Residency and the Cape Ann Museum. Every year since then, we have welcomed a distinguished artist teacher to this program to give a talk here at CAM and then to lead a 4-day workshop. This is the second year that we will be using a huge studio space at the Montserrat College of Art for the workshop. The residency has welcomed 45 artists over the last 15 years to our core program, which supplies each artist with a live-work studio for 1 month. In addition, we have welcomed more artists in 2015 by creating the Gloucester Invitational Residency for a Gloucester resident, and in 2017, an environmental installation residency, the latter in conjunction with the Ocean Alliance. The Distinguished Artist Teacher Program this year is generously sponsored by the Jeffrey H. Rochon Company of Gloucester. Karen Ristabin is the sponsor for the environmental installation artists coming up in September, and if you look on your cards, you'll see when the talk is for that. We welcome your support to sponsor our Goetemann Artist Residency talks in the future. To introduce Joan's daughter, Molly Snyder-Fink. Molly is a video producer, editor, and writer with over a decade of experience in nonfiction storytelling and documentary filmmaking, subjects which range from the criminal justice system to breastfeeding. Her educational background includes a master's degree in journalism from UC Berkeley. She has quietly been making charcoal drawings alongside her professional career, works that are full of haunted images and lyrical confessions about being human. She is now pursuing a new career in art education and is getting her master's degree in that field at Brooklyn College. She has one wonderful 7-year-old son, Elijah, and is the proud daughter of Joan Snyder. Now to introduce Joan Snyder. She is well known to the art world. Some of her credits are Guggenheim Fellow, National Endowment for the Arts Fellow, MacArthur Fellow. Her work is presently being shown in an exhibition, Epic Abstraction, at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Early works were included in the 1973 and 81 Whitney Biennials and the 1970 Corcoran Biennial. Her credits are numerous, her exhibitions throughout the world in New York and recently in London. I think it is easy to look up her bio. I decided it was more to the point to offer a quote from her own words about her work. She says, "Making art for me, practicing a religion, my work is my pride, creates for me a heritage. It is a place to struggle freely at my altar. I want my work to be strong, available, and generous. I need it to be joyous and sorrowful, complex and meditative all at once, to be vulnerable, to have a feeling of transcendence, and in this state to give something, to make an offering in paint. Paint can explain, give structure and meaning, go beyond structure, meaning, and content, and offer something to people as a reminder and a gift." So With great pride, I introduce Joan Snyder and Molly Snyder-Fink.
So, thanks, Ruth, for your wonderful introduction. Thanks, everybody, for coming on this beautiful day that you're not at the beach. Although we spent the morning at the beach, which was great. Molly and I are going to do something that we've never done. So, but we think it's a good idea. We hope it's a good idea. She's recently written a wonderful essay about my work in the Women's Art Journal, which was published in the Women's Art Journal in the fall. And I'm going to show kind of a mini survey of my work, about 35 slides. I looked up my painting list today, and I have 1,035 paintings that I've made over the years. So you're going to see 35 of them. We're going to begin, and what I just want to say that I'm going to show slides and talk a little bit about the work, and Molly's going to read excerpts from her essay. So we're going to go back and forth a bit. This painting, which we'll come to later, is called, in fact, it's called Song Cycle 6 for Molly, and that was done a few years ago. This is the cover of the Women's Art Journal with one of my more recent paintings called Lipstick, and you'll see a better image of that later on. I just wanted to show the picture. We're going to go back to 1969 in a moment, but this is a recent painting called Storyboard, which kind of, I don't know why I wanted to show it first, but it kind of sums up a lot of imagery and iconography and language that I use, that I've used over the years. So I just wanted to put this on, and then we'll head for 1969, when I was making paintings called flock paintings. And they're kind of anthropomorphic. I was still holding on to the female figure in this painting and in the whole group. But I don't know if you can see it. There's a kind of a grid on the bottom with strokes, and so it's a very early me thinking about the stroke paintings. This painting is called Lines and Strokes, and I consider it to be really my breakthrough painting that I made in 1969, where I was painting paint strokes. I was laying out ground and putting on, I had a delicate grid, and I painted paint strokes. The story that I decided to tell about this painting has to do with Molly, and then she's going to take over a little bit now. But when Molly was about 11, I had a show at the Rose Art Museum. It was kind of a survey show, and Carl Bells was the curator and wrote the catalog. Anyway, I was giving a lecture at my show, and Molly happened to come with me that time. And she was sitting kind of like we are now, and I was talking about the work. And I said, I made this painting in August of 1969 when Larry and I were not yet married. We were almost married, and Larry being Larry Fink, Molly's dad. And Molly piped in and said, oh, and then I said, and Larry went to the Woodstock Festival. And Molly immediately said to me, Mom, why didn't you go to the Woodstock Festival? And I said, because I was making lines and strokes. and it didn't connect with me until I said it, and then of course it meant something to Molly when I said it.
So I'm going to read from the essay, the first passage. Some of it is a little bit redundant, but I'll just start from the beginning. In the summer of 1969, my mother made what she considered to be her breakthrough painting. She painted lines and strokes in her New York City loft on Mulberry Street at the very same time that the Woodstock Music Festival was happening. Snyder was starting her own cultural revolution right in the center of her studio. And then with Symphony, which she painted during the same period, she was in part rebelling against color field painting, macho minimalism, and generally the male-dominated sensibility of the art world. But more significantly, she was in the early stages of creating her own iconic visual language and establishing herself as a bold, uncompromising creative force. And I started the essay in the Women's Art Journal this way, not only because this was a very important moment in the early stages of her career, but also because this story has become sort of like a myth to me, a folk tale about my mother sort of in her studio, just surrounded by her paintbrushes and her paint and her imagination. And it always spoke to me of the value of the fact that the inner world is equally, if not more important than the world around us, especially if one is an artist.
And your dad was at the Woodstock Festival probably getting stoned.
Well, and taking probably some good pictures. Maybe.
No,
Maybe.
He did take some great
I think
pictures.
he did, but
Just kidding.
yeah.
This is called Summer Painting. No, Summer Orange, and this painting is hanging at the Harvard Museum. Many friends of mine had selfies taken in front of it, and then Maggie and I finally got there last year, and it was pretty exciting to see it hanging there. This is the painting. This is called Smash Strokes Hope, and this is the painting that's hanging in the Epic Abstraction Show in New York at the Metropolitan Museum. And then I segued into paintings, kind of filling in the grid, because what happened was I got a little bit bored with the stroke paintings. They became easy, and then I decided I wanted a painting where I was in my studio maybe for 2 or 3 months and really working on one painting. So that's how the grid began to be filled in. This is called Symphony 2, and also filling in the grid, as you can see. Probably around 1973 or so. This painting is called The Storm, and it was made after I had gotten kind of well known in the art world in the early 70s, and Larry and I had just bought a farm in Pennsylvania, and I remember that I was feeling so vulnerable, and I made a stroke painting and I filled it in. I mean, this was a beautiful stroke painting, and I gridded it in with what was like, the farm was very muddy. It was April. I mean, it was really, you know, muddy and brown and red, and anyway, so the storm, that's when the storm happened. This painting is called Vanishing Theatre, and it really was one of the beginning paintings of, I don't know, giving up the stroke paintings and getting into another whole world of the idea of feminist art, female sensibility, speaking more personally, using iconography that, I don't know, I mean, I don't know where to go from that, but it has a big gash in the middle, and then I stuffed it with cheesecloth and chicken wire and sewed it up. So it's kind of 3D. You can't really see it in the picture. This is called Heart On, and it's got Valentine hearts on it and mattress batting, and this painting is owned by the Metropolitan Museum in New York.
Do you want to talk about the title?
Heart On? The title, the real reason how it was titled?
Well, the story that I like is, like, my father would always come into your studio, often different times in the morning, and
Right.
you guys would talk about your work and
Right.
come up with title ideas,
Right,
and
right.
he kind of, between you guys, you came up with this
Right, right. I think, yeah, that's part of the story.
title.
I actually think Larry and I might have been smoking a joint, and we came up with this. So it wasn't in the morning, but anyway, we did come up with this title, which I think.
But it's heart, right? Heart.
It's heart on.
On.
Yeah. You got it, Molly. Is it your turn yet?
Not yet. No.
Okay, this is called Sweet Kathy's Song, and it was actually titled after a young woman who Larry and I met at Yale, Norfolk one summer, and she was just a sweetheart kid that I ended up naming the painting Sweet Kathy's Song. But I was doing a lot of teaching in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn with kids who are challenged, you know, with their reading and math, and I did some art classes with them, and they were making beautiful paintings. And so I asked them if I could take a pile of some of them, and I did, and I made several paintings based on their drawings. I mean, some of those are kids' drawings and paintings in that painting. This is called Appletree Mast, and this painting was made, it's very light. I mean, you're seeing a really light version of the painting, which doesn't make me happy, but just imagine if we could darken it a bit. So this painting was made on Mulberry Street, and during the time that Larry and I were breaking up, so it was a really painful time and difficult painting to make. But I actually remember, to talk about a local moment, I actually remember sending this up to the Nielsen Gallery show wet. I mean, it wasn't even dry when it went to that show. But Molly's going to read something.
So I'm going to read the poem that my mother wrote on the painting, because I find it really powerful, and I also transcribe it in the essay. We remain objective and sane. We try so hard to remain objective and sane and compassionate. Lacrimi rerum. But our children are being kidnapped and raped, going crazy, wandering the streets, committing suicide. Our marriages are dissolving. Lacrimi rerum. We are mothers raising our children. We are afraid. And just for context, in part, what the quote is referring to is Eaton Patz, the little boy who got kidnapped when he was walking to the local school bus stop alone one day, and he was kidnapped, and he happened to live very close to where my mother and I lived at the time in Chinatown, Little Italy. So that is part of what the poem is about, as well as some other personal stories. Different people that she knew who had children in crisis. She translates the Latin phrase that's repeated twice at the bottom of the canvas, the tearfulness of things. Both phrases are encased in different shades of purple oil paint strokes. In her writing, she assumes the collective voice for these women, elevating the content to more than just personal. Just to the right of that panel, she makes a list of all the things that she loved about living at the farm, a property in Pennsylvania that she and my father had purchased in the early 1970s, and her marriage and what she has lost. Underneath a soft, washed pink stroke, she writes, "I loved him." In an etched square at the bottom of this, she repeats yet again, "Lacrimi rerum." So that's on the second panel there.
Okay. This is called the Orchard, the Altar, and Molly and I think I was visiting the farm with Molly when she was around 7 or so, and on our way home, we were driving home in a snowstorm, and there was an apple orchard So it really moved me very much, and I got, you know, the next painting I was working on was the orchard, the altar.
And I'm going to read again from the essay. As a child, I took refuge in her studio. The smell of turpentine was comforting to me, and I'd wander into her workspace just to be reminded of it. There was always something new to look at. At the age of 6, I recall my mother inviting me to fasten white squares of silky fabric around ghost-like trees in the orchard, the altar, rendering an eerie, wintry scene. And then at the age of 10, my mother offered that I write a catalog essay for a show she was having then, and an excerpt read, "As I go to my mom's studio each time, I watch it develop, paintings popping up in different areas of the wall. As I watch our life develop, I think of how paintings and life relate. Over the years, our life developed just like her paintings did."
I just have to add one thing. The reason I invited Molly to put white satin squares on that painting is because I didn't have a babysitter. I'm serious. I remember thinking, what am I going to do with her today? So I said, come in and paste some little white things on the painting, and she did. I mean, it was perfect. This is called Beanfield with Music. And this is after Molly and I moved to, well, I don't know, maybe I was just seeing there in the summers, but for a few years. But we moved to, I rented a house in Eastport, New York, and my studio was surrounded by bean fields. And I felt like I wanted to get back to the feeling of the stroke paintings, but not make the stroke paintings. I mean, my paintings had become very heavy and, you know, I mean, end of the marriage, dark, some of them were dark, whatever. So I started making beanfield paintings. I don't have a lot of them here, but then I made a moonfield painting, pumpkin field. I think this is called Ode to the Pumpkin Field. It's very large. And that is weed field, it's called Cantata in the Weed Field. And what happened was that the farmer who owned the fields surrounding this little house that we were renting had a stroke or something happened to him, and all the fields, the bean fields, turned into weed fields. So I began making weed field paintings. This is called The Cherry Tree, and you'll see a lot of cherry trees in my painting after this. I mean, I really got hooked on the subject of the cherry tree. And the story is that I was visiting my father, who was in his 90s, at a nursing home on Fort Hamilton Parkway in Brooklyn, which is probably, I don't want to be mean, but it's probably one of the more it's not a very good looking area of Brooklyn, Fort Hamilton Parkway. But right in front of a little house was a cherry tree. As I was driving to visit Pop, there was a little cherry tree, and in this yard, and it was absolutely beautiful. And it had cherries growing, it had cherries on the ground that were rotting, it had cherries that were falling off. And I remember knocking on the woman's door, ringing her bell, and asking her, could I photograph the cherry tree, which I did. It became such a metaphor for me for life and death. And I'm sure related very much to my father. This is Carmina. And getting back to the stroke paintings a little bit, kind of with a fury I can see, and also incorporating the moonfield in that painting. Oratorio is a painting that I painted in Willow, New York, where Maggie and I, Maggie's in the audience, she's been my partner for something like 33 years. I always forget exactly how many, but it's a lot. I mean, Maggie and I have been together a long time. So we owned a little house in Willow, New York, and I made this painting in that little house.
Small studio.
Small studio. Well, yeah, but it was like a little house, but it was a small studio. And what I was feeling when I was making this painting was I felt like I was giving myself a retrospective. Because if you look at it, you'll see like pumpkin fields and squares and hearts and symphonies and oceans and moons, you know, screaming faces. I mean, almost everything that I was putting in paintings. I mean, there's even a section that has nails. I nailed in all these nails. I put wood on the back and nailed it. So this is oratorio. And always searching for beauty, this is called. I think this painting is at in Skidmore at, what's the name of the museum at Skidmore? Anyway, it's at the museum at the university. The Tang, yeah, thank you. Symphony 6. I didn't show many of the symphonies, but I'm catching you up a little bit. This is Symphony 6.
Excuse me, do you think you could say a little bit about materials that you're using here and there? You don't have to all, annotate every single one of the materials, but here and there, I know how rich they are with that. With things
Well, yeah, and they're hard to see, and this painting in particular is not showing up very well, which is too bad. But this is called Summer Fugue. I use a lot of paper mache, and I mean, this painting has kind of a hoop in it with that I got at the sewing store and made the pond that way, and it's got, I think Molly's going to talk a little bit more about the materials. But you know, it's oil and acrylic and paper mache and seeds and glitter and everything you can imagine. Are you
Velvet.
And velvet, yeah.
Actually, yeah, what I was about to read does talk to some degree about material as well. I'm in my mother's Brooklyn studio, light streaming in through the skylights. It's April 2018, just months before my 39th birthday, the same age my mother was when she gave birth to me. It's also the month she was born, April. She often calls April the cruelest month because it was during this month in 1978 that she had a late miscarriage, a baby boy who was to be named Oliver. I came into the world about a year after this painful loss. For every failure to create, there is another creation on its way. As I look around the studio today, I write, you get the sense that you're amidst a witch's den sitting in this studio. I'm studying a recently started small painting lying flat on its back. A piece of wheat-colored burlap is freshly glued to the canvas with an oval of bark, roots, and dried rosebuds atop the cloth, embossed by poured layers of green acrylic paint and topped off with golden glitter, creating a majestic nest-like relief image. Dragonflies come to mind, or butterflies, spring, the renewal of life, beauty, and yet these are dead things encased in paint and chemicals. My mother leverages organic matter and toxic elements to express her ideas about being alive. The materials themselves infuse new meaning into old, deeply human stories. And then just one other note I'll add to about materials is my mom is often asking me to bring, sometimes I drive up to Woodstock to spend time with her and Maggie, with my son, and she's often saying, oh, Molly, can you go into the studio and see if I have some, what is it, GAC 800. GAC 800. I need some GAC 800. This is like a very, very important part of her work.
They gave away my secret.
Oh, no.
It's okay. But she did just mention a lot of materials.
Also.
Yeah. Are you done? Yeah. So this is Summer Fugue. The other thing that I have to say with this painting, and I don't have it here, but that summer, Maggie and I were in a book group, and we were reading, we're in a classical book group, and we were reading Swann's Way by Proust. And there's a passage in Proust that exactly describes this painting. I mean, it's just, and I had made the painting, or I was like 90% done with the painting, and read this passage and couldn't believe it. Anyway, I don't have it here. This is Song Cycle 6 for Molly, and made in, I don't know, around 2016, I think. I've made something like I think six song cycles. And number 1 is for Molly, and then in between I made a bunch of others, and this is number 6. This is Rose Grid. It's just kind of a small painting with, you know, the rose became another symbol and image that I did a lot with in 2015 and 16.
And also the grid. You know, I'm not specifically talking about this painting in my essay, but as far as the grid goes, in 2000 I wrote gallery notes for her exhibition titled In Times of Great Disorder, which featured a suite of 18 monoprints, a show at Nielsen Gallery that all employed grids with colorful, bold mandalas circulating around them. I wrote about her use of the grid in these monoprints as an organizing principle, a way to remain sane in the midst of chaos. The grid that begs the image to have composure, an imagined sanity pushing through the havoc, explosive tissues of ink, some marks may rest. We are living in times of great disorder. Nothing is permanent or ever completely still, yet the intuitive marks and incessant circles do the healing and bring some order. Also at the time, I wrote about the job of a daughter being to learn her mother's pain, to learn her own pain, and to know how to distinguish between the two. Many aspects of our lives have changed in the last 18 years, and yet I find that what I wrote then still resonates with my present experience of sitting with her work.
This, it's so blown out, it's embarrassing, but it's really rich and dark, and this is called Symphony 7. It's large, I don't know the exact size, but it's like maybe 4.5, 5 feet by 12 feet. Also blown out, Amor Matris. This one's called Love Mom. Anyway, it's a gorgeous painting. You just have to imagine, close your eyes and imagine it. How beautiful it is.
Or go on the website.
Go on the website.
Yeah.
Should we go to lipstick?
Okay.
Are you going to read, Mom?
Yeah, I'm going to read again. Again, from the essay, it is a peculiar position to be in, knowing that my mother's latest body of work is, in part, a manifestation of her grief about some of the painful experiences I've gone through. Much like she chronicled the deterioration of her own marriage with paintings like Appletree Mast, she is, in this latest body of work with paintings such as Storyboard, Love Mom, and Lipstick, processing complex emotional layers using her signature visual language. As my mother noted recently, I feel free making them, making marks in a stream of consciousness with messages that can't be read or spoken aloud to anyone, messages that break apart using all the iconography developed over 50 years of working, totems, angels, female figures, nests, openings, breasts, strokes, lines, marks, words, stick figures, screaming mouths, red lips. And then I just want to talk about another sort of folk tale or myth for me, which I think if you've read anything about her work, you've read. But I love the story of when, in taking her the first painting class in graduate school, how she said that she felt like she was speaking for the first time through paint, because before that she hadn't been able to find a way in which to express herself or feel comfortable maybe in her own skin until she was finally in her element painting. And I find that to be a very powerful story and idea.
Excuse me, Molly?
Yeah.
Your essay, has it been published or is it about to be published?
It's published, and we also have some magazines here.
Thank you.
If you want to look.
This is called Floating Soul, and this was painted maybe a year ago, or less.
So I'm going to read.
Molly wrote about it, so that, you know, she might as well read instead of me trying to explain it.
Again, I'm in the Brooklyn studio studying a recent work, Floating Soul, a large square canvas whose central figure is part of the female body, her breasts and belly bulging out, suggesting pregnancy. Attached to her belly are wing-like thighs that seem to lift her in space, for she is swimming in a sea of deep blue water, surrounded by paler shades of lavender blue, and finally framed in a copper-toned earthy circle of herbs and bark. My mother's paintings are bound by the materials that she chooses, but their identity soars above what makes them. Their identity is formed by the story she is telling in the process of creating. We are skin and bones and blood and muscle. We have a brain and a heart and lungs and a tongue, but does any of this define who we are?
This is a recent painting called Rose and Vine, and I did it last summer in Woodstock. The feeling I got with this painting as I was doing it was I had read something about outsider artists, and the phrase momenti mori or memento mori. No, that's not the phrase. It has something to do, it's a Latin phrase that has something to do with filling in the vacuum, not wanting any empty space in a painting. And that's sort of why outsider artists, you know, they so often fill in every space. And as I was making this painting, it's kind of the way I felt, that I was just filling in every space possible of this painting. I don't have that much more to say about it. So this is the painting that I made this summer in Woodstock. I mean, it's a big 3-part painting. I don't have a title for it yet, but I just recently finished it. So that gives you an idea of what's going on.
And it's very big, right?
It's very big, but I don't know the exact. Each piece is probably 4 by 5.5 or something, so it could be 12 feet by 5.5.
Is this the painting that you, when you were emailing me or writing or something, you were saying, I'm staring at, I don't know why I decided to do a 3-panel painting.
Oh, right.
I'm just staring at it. I don't know why am I?
Well, because of the London show that I hadn't painted. I really was distracted by several things, career-wise. So I hadn't painted in many months, and for some reason in Woodstock, I ordered all these canvases and decided to put 3 of them together and make this very large painting. I mean, yeah, and that's what I was saying, was what am I doing and why am I? And it happened, you know, it's kind of like magic. I mean, you don't really know exactly, you know, when you look back on something, how or why it happens, but the middle section, which you can't see that easily, is a piece of burlap. It's like a pocket, and inside the pocket are dried poppy pods in the pocket, and then paint is kind of pouring down onto them. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of magical that this happened, and I felt really, really lucky that I was able to make what I thought was a good painting after not having worked for 5 or 6 months. So Molly, are you?
I'm gonna read the last
She's
passage.
going to read the last thing, and then we're going to open it up to the audience for questions.
My mother's journey as an artist and her resulting body of work has taught me many lessons, and I am still learning. Foremost, she has taught me that if you are going down one path and another one presents itself that fills you with intrigue and hunger, take that one. It may be painful, but it will make you a stronger, clearer person. And although you are part of a world with influential forces all around you, follow your own voice and create your own language. Further, once you have found your calling, your spiritual and artistic duty, go to it each and every day. As she has written on one of her etching woodblock prints, my work has been absolutely faithful to me. I think that perhaps she meant it the other way around. It will only be in that act of daily artistic devotion that the fruits which are yours to bear will make themselves known.
Now it's your turn.
I just want to say.
Oh, I think they have a mic for you.
We're gonna mic you. Okay, I'm just moved. I'm very moved by your relationship. I think you're very lucky. You just have a beautiful, beautiful thing. So
Thank you.
thank you
Thank you.
for sharing it.
Thank you.
Hi, I actually have 2 questions. Is this in oil or is that acrylic?
Well, everything I do at this point is oil and acrylic.
Oh, okay, both
Or
in the same
acrylic
thing.
and oil.
And the other question I have is, when do you decide to use, an identifiable image as opposed to a stroke to explain, or to communicate? Because I know you go between abstraction and some realistic imagery. So how do you decide when to use the realistic image that, immediately people will grasp, as opposed to movement and gesture to explain something?
Well, I'm not convinced that people will immediately grasp imagery that I use necessarily. I mean, unless it's, I don't know, they're not a house or a, yeah. But, I almost can't even answer that question. It's like 50 years of painting and 50 years of imagery and symbols and language, and, how do you decide to write a novel about this rather than that? I don't know, I have sketchbooks full of, sketches and ideas, and I don't really think of that there's a difference between the stroke paintings and paintings that have some imagery or iconography in them. I mean, to me, it's all one thing. And needless to say, I can put both things in one painting. And they're not even things in my mind. I mean, it's, so. Where's the mic?
I first saw your, oh, wait, leave the mic. Who's talking? Who did that?
Right here.
I first saw your work at the Rose Art Museum, just loved it, and it was such a revelation for me through art. I also love the work of Cy Twombly, and I wonder if there's any kinship.
Well, I didn't really know about Twombly until maybe the last decade, because he was in Italy, and he wasn't really somebody that was on my radar or a lot of our radars. I do love Twombly's work, and I do look at it. He's a poet, and I mean, there is a similarity in some ways, for sure, but I don't know what else to say. I mean, I love Anselm Kiefer also, and there's certainly a similarity between my work and his work. So I just think we share sensibilities, And yeah. I mean, you know, one of the interesting things is Twombly will write on a painting and everyone thinks he's so wonderful and poetic and delicate. I write on a painting and I'm called a feminist. You know, and it's true. And I so often, you know, I only write on a painting when I absolutely have to, when I really feel like there's no other way I'm going to write on this painting. But I do censor myself and edit myself because it's real, you know, it just became such a thing that, you know, of labeling me because I write on paintings. You know, and Schnabel will write on a painting and he's a hero, you know, and he's just absolutely heroic when he writes on a painting.
But you did have a very nice encounter with him recently.
I did have a nice encounter with him recently in front of my Epic Abstraction. And the Epic Abstraction show, there was a dinner and a talk, and I was speaking, and he came up to me, and we were standing in front of my painting with him and Bryce Martin, actually, and there's a photograph that I think I put on Facebook or something. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, Julian was really, really sweet. I mean, we really had a nice conversation. And all my life, I would make Julian Schnabel jokes. I mean, when Molly was little, and you know, she would get sick, and then I would get sick, and my line always was, "Does Julian Schnabel get the flu?" You know, and you remember that, right? You know, and even if he did, he probably had 3 nannies, you know, to jump on the kids. Anyway. Other questions?
I just have something to say. I used to follow your work at the Nielsen Gallery all the time, and I remember all the life and the dancing and the paintings, and there was a struggle, and I remember saying to Nina, she's happy again.
She's happy, right. Thank you.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy, sad, happy, sad. I guess if there's no other questions, then we've done it. Thank you.